I'm Dave, and this is Austin Eats.
Have you ever spent all day smoking a pork shoulder, did everything by the book, and it still turned out dry? You ended up with a pile of pork that had to be smothered in barbecue sauce just to be edible? Well, never again. I'm going to show you how a simple brine makes juicy pulled pork a guarantee. We're talking about incredibly succulent, fall-apart tender meat every single time. You're going to love this. First, let's talk meat. Amazing pulled pork starts with the right cut, a bone-in pork shoulder, not boneless. This roast has a lot of intramuscular fat that slowly renders during the cooking process, basting the meat from the inside out. The bone adds flavor and is also very easy to remove when the roast is done. Brining is the single most important step for preventing dry pork, and it starts hours before this thing even sees the grill. When you soak the pork in saltwater brine, the salt helps the muscle fibers absorb more moisture. That means even after a long, slow smoke, the pork will be juicy and tender. For our brine, we're keeping it simple. In a big pot or a food-safe bucket, we're going to combine 7 cups of apple juice, 3 cups of water, half a cup of kosher salt, half a cup of packed brown sugar, a couple tablespoons of Worcestershire, a half of a yellow onion chopped, 4 smashed garlic cloves, and 1 tablespoon of chili powder. By the way, I make my own chili powder, and there is a link to the recipe in the description below. The salt is doing the heavy lifting for moisture, and the sugar and apple juice will add a beautiful, subtle sweetness that plays really well with the rich pork. Just whisk it all together until everything's dissolved. Once your brine is ready, pour it over the pork shoulder. Make sure that the meat is completely submerged. If not, just add a little more water until the solution comes up to the top of the pork shoulder. Now this goes into the refrigerator for at least 12 hours. This is not a step to rush. You have to give the salt time to work. While the pork shoulder is in the brine, make the dry rub. This rub is made with kosher salt, brown sugar, black pepper, granulated garlic, granulated onion, chili powder, paprika, and mustard powder. Just mix it all together and make sure to break apart lumps of brown sugar. After 12 hours in the brine, it's time to get our pork shoulder ready for the smoke. Rinse off the brine and pat it completely dry with paper towels. A dry surface is important for building that crunchy, irresistible bark. This is also the time to trim off any excess or rubbery fat that just won't render while it's cooking. Use a sharp knife to trim it down to about a 1/4 inch thickness. Next up, the binder. I like to use a thin layer of melted duck fat to help the dry rub adhere. Yellow mustard also works. The trick is to apply a super thin layer, just enough to get the surface tacky. Once the duck fat is on, add the dry rub. On a big cut of meat like this, you can't be shy. You want a heavy, generous coat all the way around. When the roast is fully coated with dry rub, let it rest for an hour to come up to room temperature. With the pork prepped, let's fire up the Kamado Joe. The Kamado Joe is great at holding those low and slow temperatures for hours on end. I'm going to set it up for cooking at 250 degrees Fahrenheit using my FireBoard temperature controller. This thing's a game changer for low and slow cooking. It will maintain a set temperature plus or minus a few degrees for hours and hours. Watch my video on why you need a FireBoard for low and slow cooking. A link is at the end of this video and in the description below. For the fuel, I'm using extra large Fogo brand lump charcoal for a clean, long burn. I always use Fogo whenever I cook low and slow. I'm not adding any wood for smoke for this cook. The charcoal will add enough smoky flavor. If it has too much smoke, well, my family just won't eat it. If you prefer, you can add 1 or 2 chunks of fruit wood like apple or cherry for some mild sweetness. I do not recommend hickory or mesquite with pork. For me, the smoke is just too strong. And don't soak your wood, just bury a chunk or 2 in the charcoal so they smolder nice and slow throughout the cooking process. I'm setting up for indirect cooking with the deflectors on the lower level, and on top of those I'm putting a drip pan with some water in it. The pan will catch drippings to prevent flare-ups, and it will add moisture inside the grill and help build some incredible bark on the pork shoulder. Place the cooking grate on the top level, close the dome, and let the Kamado Joe sit for 20 to 30 minutes for it to come up to temperature before the meat goes in. Alright, the Kamado Joe is holding steady at 250 degrees. I placed the pork shoulder directly on the grate, fat cap side up. That rendering fat is going to baste the meat for the first couple of hours. My FireBoard probe is in the thickest part of the pork shoulder. You want to keep it away from the bone or you will get a false reading. After 2 hours, you can start spritzing it every 45 minutes or so with a mixture of apple cider and water. This helps keep the surface from getting too dark or dry and actually helps attract more smoke. Around 4 or 5 hours, you're going to hit the stall. You're going to see the internal temperature climb to around 160 degrees Fahrenheit and then just stop. This is normal. The meat is sweating and the moisture is cooling the surface of the meat at the same rate that the smoker is trying to raise it. This is the time to wrap the roast. I like to place the pork roast in a disposable aluminum pan and then wrap that in several layers of heavy-duty aluminum foil. Then it goes back in the smoker until it reaches 195 degrees Fahrenheit. This technique, called the Texas crutch, will make the meat unbelievably tender. Okay, the roast is now at 195 degrees Fahrenheit and we're ready for the final step, letting it rest. Carefully remove the foil-wrapped roast from the smoker and wrap it up in several layers of bath towels and then place that in a cooler to let the whole thing rest for at least 90 minutes. 2 hours is even better. The rest is absolutely critical. It allows the meat to relax and reabsorb all of those juices. It is the secret to moist pulled pork. If you cut it too soon, all that juice is just going to run right out. So wrap it up and let it rest.
So it's time to check out the pork shoulder and see how we did. This has been resting in my cooler for about an hour and 45 minutes, and the internal temperature is still 175 degrees, so it will be nice and hot. When it was in the smoker and it hit 165, I wrapped it in foil and put it back until it hit 195. When I did that, I actually put the pork shoulder first in a disposable aluminum pan and then wrapped several layers of heavy-duty foil around the pan. I did that because it helps prevent a mishap in the Kamado Joe. I have previously done that just in foil, put it on, tore the foil, and lost all the juice. So I do it this way now and it works out just great. So let's unwrap it and see how we did.
So the first thing to do is to get that bone out. A little twist and a tug is about all it takes, and it comes right out. Look at that. So first I'm going to transfer this pork to a different container so that I can shred it without all of the juice in it. I'll probably pour all of that juice back onto the shredded pork, but it's a lot easier and cuts down the splash factor if you have it separated before you shred the pork. Now for the fun part. You can use those fancy meat claws if you have them, but honestly, 2 big forks works just fine. Just pull it all apart, making sure to mix the dark, crusty bark from the outside with all that juicy, tender meat from the inside. As you're shredding, pull out any big pieces of fat that didn't fully render. Once it's all pulled, pour those reserved juices right back over the meat and give it a toss. The final step is building the perfect pulled pork sandwich. Pile some of that glorious juicy pork high on a soft brioche bun and top it with your favorite barbecue sauce. It doesn't get much better than that. By the way, I have a new cookbook out. Click on the link in the description to check it out. Hey, if you liked the video, let me know. And please subscribe. I'll see you next time on Austin Eats.